This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
The opinions on this program are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WPSL. WPSL does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WPSL. Legal questions? Ask a lawyer. Give us a call at 340-1590, 340-1590 here at the studios of WPSL. And Ask a Lawyer with your host, attorney Stuart M. Address.
Good morning, Treasure Coast. I hope you are all having a good Friday morning and are looking forward to a hopefully sunny weekend. We're here today and we're going to continue talking about defamation. We have an interesting part about defamation to talk about, internet defamation, and some nasty, nasty allegations that came from an old case of mine. But before we go there, again, Cliff likes to say, get ready to rumble, and I kept talking last week, it's not necessarily a rumble, sometimes it is, Last night there was a real rumble. I don't know how many of you are aware, but, we talk about the rule of law in this country. And sometimes I wonder how many of us truly understand what that means. It doesn't just mean having the Congress as the legislature passing legislation. It doesn't just mean the executive branch, the president, implementing and enforcing the legislation. And it doesn't just mean the courts interpreting the legislation. We say that all three branches of government are co-equal. Yeah, that's what it says in the Constitution. They're not. And the president's not the most powerful. And Congress is not the most powerful. They have great checks and balances on each other.
That's the way it's supposed to work.
Well, it is, and usually it does. But it is the courts, the third branch of government, that truly is the most powerful. Because when you go to the Supreme Court, for example, there is no appeal. Mm-hmm. There is nothing you can do. Mm-hmm. If the Supreme Court tells the president, let's say in this case Nixon, produce the tapes, since he resigned yesterday 44 years ago, got to produce the tapes. There's talk about whether or not the special counsel might issue a grand jury subpoena, in which case it'll be fought in federal district court. Then it'll be fought in the D.C. Court of Appeals, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court.
Do you think we'll ever get to a day where they say, produce the emails?
Probably.
You think so?
But ultimately, whatever the Supreme Court determines is going to be the way it is. It is the rule of law. We rely upon Congress, hopefully, to pass legislation. We rely upon the executive, the president, and all the agencies under his control, maybe one day her control, and to implement the legislation, enforce the legislation. But when we are in doubt as to what does the legislation mean, it is the courts that give us that answer, whether we like it or not. Mm-hmm. Now, we have some appeals, ultimately the most significant things to the United States Supreme Court, and it has the last say on anything it wants to speak about.
You have to have some place where it all stops.
Correct. And that is the rule of law. So why am I bringing that up now? Because we did have a rumble yesterday. I'm not sure how many people are familiar. I mean, if you enjoy watching, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, you're familiar. Most people, I don't think, are, those junkies.
It's harder and harder to watch the news, no matter what channel you pick.
Why? It's entertainment. Yeah. These days, it's entertainment.
Yeah. But they're beating this, and you're like, all right, I heard that yesterday. And no matter what channel you watch.
That's right. And I see an attorney friend of mine has logged on to the Facebook Live. Hey, Tom, if you feel like calling in, call, and we can have a little bit of a debate maybe, or maybe you agree with everything I'm saying. But anyway, yesterday there were a few adults that had been detained. Remember the adults and the kids separated. I don't know if this had anything to do with kids. But there were some adults that were not supposed to be deported until 11:59 p.m. last night. That's when the judge's order preventing the deportation would expire, federal judge. Somehow they were deported at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They were put on
Was
planes.
that the only flight?
I don't know.
If
They were put on
I
planes
like-
and sent wherever their homes were.
You think that it could have waited till the next day?
You would think. And so, of course, there was an emergency petition in federal court, and the ACLU was arguing, get them back. It's a violation of your order, Judge. And I was listening last night to not the oral, because federal court doesn't allow taping, but I was listening to reading of the transcript, portions of the transcript. And the federal judges are gods in their courtroom. They're there for life. They're Article 3 judges. He was none too pleased with the government. And, the government lawyer wasn't responsible for it. I don't even think he knew what was going on. I believe him. He said, well, Judge, I just learned about this the same time the plaintiff's lawyer learned about this. I've made inquiries, and, I think they were on flights that were chartered. They're not on U.S. government planes. We can't turn them around. Judge kept interrupting. Says, I know it's not you, but these planes are either going to be turned around, or when they land, these people are immediately going to be put on a plane back to the U.S., subject to my jurisdiction, or I'm going to start issuing orders to show cause why certain people should not be held in contempt and jailed. And I'm going to start with the Attorney General, because he's the chief law enforcement officer. So essentially, you had a federal judge threatening a order to show cause why the Attorney General should not be held in contempt unless these people were returned, to use the judge's words, forthwith, which is even more immediate than immediately. Mm-hmm. It means do it yesterday.
Right now, yeah.
Do it yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm none too happy. I'm about to start punishing people. Now, as I mentioned to you before the show, I did not get to check this morning to see what the status was and whether or not those adults had been returned. But what was the big issue that made this so important, to the court at least? I mean, I understand, look, if I'm the plaintiff's attorney or if I'm the ACLU, and the government has violated any order, I'm going to jump up and down and scream, and, that's just my role. But not every order, even though every order is supposed to be obeyed, not every order is as significant as every other order in terms of consequences. Why was this so important? Because, and I think it was 3, I might be wrong, these 3 adults had properly presented themselves at the border seeking asylum with the contention that their home countries, if they went back to their home countries, they would likely be killed. And now here was the government sending them back to their home.
But isn't everyone saying that coming over the border these days?
No, that's not true. No, I'm sorry. That's balderdash. Okay? There are a number of types of claims for asylum. Not everybody is saying, I'm running away because I'm going to be killed. Not everybody is a political activist in their country. Not everybody is a reporter. Not everybody has fought in the revolutionary or the underground. No, not everybody is coming here and saying, they're going to kill me. And even if they are, they have a right to be heard to determine whether that's a truthful claim or an untruthful claim. If it's not, send them back. If it is, it's contrary to our rule of law to send them back. And so you had the government jumping the gun and sending these people back to countries where possibly they would be executed once they were returned. That's pretty serious. And the federal judge took it very seriously. And I guess when, the show ends, I will do some Googling and see what happened, and are these people back in federal custody here in the U.S.? Or maybe even federal custody elsewhere. I don't know.
Or put on a very slow flight back and then turned around and sent right back after midnight.
Sent to Timbuktu. Well, no, because at this point, look, I haven't read it all. I haven't heard. I suspect that the judge has also extended his order until either it's resolved in the court that deals with it, or until he further authorizes the deportation, until he's satisfied they've had due process, and if due process says return them, And if the federal judge believes due process has occurred, then I suspect, he will vacate his order and allow whatever needs to happen. But I have a funny feeling, in addition to the order he entered requiring them to come back, I have a funny feeling there's another order, saying that they're staying until I say otherwise. And there was an interesting exchange between the government lawyer and the judge last night. The government lawyer, like most lawyers, is waiting for a written order. That makes it real.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really, but it's nice to be on paper. And so the government lawyer, the assistant United States attorney who was assigned to this, is asking the court, when the order will be ready. And the judge looks at him and says, I just entered it on the record. That's the order. Obey. I think a lot of people were scurrying last night, and rightfully so. I don't know who these people were. I don't know whether these were criminals that were just trying to sneak into our country. I don't know if they were terrorists trying to sneak into our country. I don't know if they were activists in their native countries and were marked for death. I don't know. But the rule of law means that you have due process to present your claims and have them reviewed. Without that, we're no better than any 2-bit, 3-bit dictatorship in the world. And so I think personally that is why that federal judge was so incensed. And another thing that would be fun to look up, it doesn't always mean anything, but to see whether that federal judge was appointed by a Democratic president or a Republican president. People these days will say, okay, he acted like that because he was appointed by, Obama. Maybe he was appointed by Reagan or Bush.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't really matter. And I won't deviate much further so we can get into where we were going to go.
No matter who appointed him, he still could be part of the resistance.
Yeah, but federal judges, and I would like to believe, regardless of their philosophies, and I have my concerns about the current nominee to the Supreme Court, and sometimes they do surprise you. You'd like to believe that when they take that oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution, sometimes these justices and judges in federal court as well will later on in their lives, when they write their little memoirs or books, they will tell you that there was a transformation because those words mean something. And while they may have personal philosophies that may sneak in a little bit more as a federal district court judge, maybe less as a federal circuit court judge, some of them say they changed as a Supreme Court justice. I mean, you had eight
But
other...
what you want is the law to be the law, and that's
right. And
that's
the problem with you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The problem with that is, why do we have courts in the first place? Because the law can be ambiguous, and when we're talking about the Constitution,
That's what makes us a civilized nation.
it is
our
precisely.
laws. Yes.
And
Yeah.
our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, comes from the Magna Carta and the Charter of Laws in England, way back. They also are a democratic country. Doesn't matter with king, queen, whatever. They are a democratic country. They're more of a parliamentary system of government, which we won't get into. But in terms of the courts, it's very similar. And our laws, in very many respects, at least from the common law, is very similar. But when we're talking about interpreting the Constitution, the problems we have are, maybe twofold. Maybe that's to simplify it, but twofold. The first is there seem to be two theories as to how to interpret the Constitution. And of course, if you're going to interpret the Constitution faithfully, you have to figure out how you're going to do it. And one theory is that it is as written. And you go back and you look at what the framers' intent was in, early 1780s before it actually passed as a constitution. I mean, 200 and some odd years ago?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know about automobiles. They didn't know about...
But somehow they got it right.
Yeah, amazingly, right? They didn't know about the space station, fighting in the atmosphere, atomic bombs. They didn't know any of this stuff. So how do you do it? If you do believe that you need to interpret the Constitution as written, how do you do that? What many judges have said and many scholars have said is that they look at the words that were written in the time they were written, and they try to see to what extent the framers anticipated changes and how would they have reacted to those changes given what they wrote. That's one theory. It's a more conservative theory. And I'm not saying it's a wrong theory.
Mm-hmm.
The other theory is that the Constitution is a living, breathing document.
Well, that we can change it whenever we will.
Well, no, you can't change it until you amend it.
Mm-hmm.
No. You cannot change it unless it's amended. But by being a living and breathing document is meant that you look at the framers' intent with what they knew and they had at their disposal at the time, and you take that and you try to understand, given our current technology, our current circumstances, what would be the closest to maintaining faithfulness to the words of the Constitution? So there is a big difference. And it's maybe a little bit of semantics, but it divides different types of judges and justices. And it's one of the first things they ask in confirmation hearings. So this is all a roundabout way at getting at the rule of law. Whether you have a justice that believes in original intent or living, breathing document, doesn't matter what I think. What they are trying to do, if they're being truly faithful, most of the time I think they are. Not always, but most of the time. They're trying to preserve the rule of law. It is the last thing that this nation has beyond any other. And again, not even trying to get into politics, it doesn't matter who's in the office right now. It applies to the president. It applies to a congressman who was just arrested for insider trading yesterday from New York. It applies to everyone. And if we maintain that rule of law, then we're all protected. And that is why I think the federal judge last night became so upset. And at one point, according to the transcript, he even said, "I know I'm raising my voice." I can imagine him in the courtroom right now yelling. He says, "But I am so upset over this." And as I'm listening to that, I could understand why he was so upset. It wasn't just that an order was violated. It's the callousness in which it was violated and what the consequences could have been.
But see, I think that's the most important. From where I'm sitting, it seems like that's the most important thing. The judge gave the order. The judge, that was the end result. He made the decision. And then his decision was violated.
Exactly.
It's just like a law on the books that mayors won't enforce or police departments won't enforce. It's a law.
Right,
Your job is to enforce the law.
And you're right, but the difference
They
is...
shouldn't be able to pick and choose the laws they want to enforce.
Well, no, the executive does have that right. The executive, headed by the president, does have the right to take the resources of the United States, Department of Justice, and choose by appointment of an attorney general and FBI director and things like that, what his priorities are in enforcement of the law. So if it costs too much to enforce every single law, for example, President Obama did not actively enforce the laws regarding drug offenses that were nonviolent. He chose to put the financial resources available under the budget to other laws.
Okay, but then shouldn't you open the doors and let everyone out of jails who have been put in jail for that same offense?
Well, no, because just because we're not enforcing it that harshly right now, because we have more priorities over there, doesn't mean that their convictions weren't correct in the first place, even though I might disagree with them. There are other mechanisms to try to get them out, which are hard, but there are other mechanisms.
Get them out, but we shouldn't have put them in.
Perhaps, but it's still a law. It's just a question of how are we allocating resources. We don't send code enforcement officers out aggressively to see if blades of grass are a quarter of an inch too high. Yet, if some condo commando, complains, I guess somebody's going to be sent out.
I think that's the key word, though. I think they don't go out at all unless someone complains.
But they are but the city is putting its resources in other areas. It may be more police. It may be more attention to parks and recreation. They're taking all the laws and all the ordinances we have, and they're saying, okay, we have this budget. This is how we're going to allocate it. These are my priorities as the mayor, as the council, as the city manager.
The best that we can do with what we have.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so the executive, wherever you are, City of Port St. Lucie or the President of the United States, the executive has discretion to choose how to do that. And we may not agree, and I may not agree, but legally that right to choose that has to be respected. But that doesn't mean violating the law. Not enforcing a law as aggressively as one might want is a lot different than violating a law or even violating a court order. Mm-hmm. So that was like just, a little half a show of, again, current events. What happened last night, what is going on in this country right now. And, hey, folks, understand, this particular rant has nothing to do with President Trump. President Trump didn't violate the order. I don't even think he gave the order to violate the order.
Yeah, he probably didn't even know what was going on.
I don't even think he knew the order was being violated.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with him. This has to do with a decision by somebody within the Justice Department to send these people away before the judge's stay expired. And that's the problem. And so the judge got angry, and hopefully these people are back, and they'll get their due process. And if they should be returned, they'll be returned. And you won't hear me complaining about it. But, if they were leading the opposition to the government of Bolivia and showing up, they're about to get executed in a firing squad, well, given our laws and our values, they get asylum here.
Shouldn't they have asked for asylum in the first country that they came into?
No, I mean, I get
No, I want asylum in America.
I can understand wanting asylum here.
Sure. But
it's better than a lot of other places.
But what are the rules? We don't even know what the rules are. Really,
well, I don't know what the rules are about that. Where the refugees
we've never
traveling
really
all
thought
across the
about
world.
this before.
And I guess Congress could pass legislation saying you can't seek asylum in the United States.
Right, you can't cross
if you pass through
how
other
many
countries first.
Yeah.
Yes. If you pass through England first, you got to ask for asylum there.
Right.
Whatever.
Right. You can't mosey on through and go somewhere else.
Make it a first world country, though, please. All right. Let's sort of transition into hopefully, maybe not, closing out defamation. I'm going to just quickly sort of rehash one of the older, just to get us back online.
Right.
The damages for defamation. You have your general damages, which are economic loss, emotional suffering, pain and anguish, those types of things. You also have special damages for special types of economic loss, things that may be in the future, perhaps, that you're not going to be able to recover from for a period of time, in which you usually need an expert witness. And then you have nominal damages. And nominal damages are something lawyers hate, particularly lawyers that are on a contingency fee. Nominal damages are when the jury says, you're right, I'll give you $1. Mm-hmm. And it happens. Mm-hmm. It happened to Donald Trump. I don't know how many people remember.
Yeah, but he's happy being right.
You're right. And he had the money not to care about the dollar.
Yeah.
Donald Trump sued the NFL when he was the owner of the fledgling United States Football League franchise way back when I was in high school. And he sued the NFL for antitrust violations. And he won. And the jury gave him $1. And because it was
Because he didn't have any losses, right?
right,
I mean,
because it was
yeah, he really-
antitrust, the dollar was tripled to $3. I don't know if he ever collected. I do know that under the antitrust law, the attorney's fee statute, the attorneys probably made a lot of money. Trump didn't get anything. His franchise was done. The USFL was done. But you can get nominal damages. And defamation, too. Nominal damages are one of the things that a jury is authorized to award. If they believe that you're right, but you weren't hurt, and you weren't hurt economically, you really weren't even hurt emotionally, but you're right that it was defamation. So they say you're right, and they give you your $1, and
Here's a buck, go away.
yeah, you at least get to say they said I was right.
Yes. Yeah.
And sometimes, sometimes that's all the client really wants. Thank you. What wasn't NFL has never won antitrust case?
That's right. Never.
Trump. When Trump won and got $1 when he was suing for the franchise he owned in the USFL.
He beat the NFL.
Yes. If I misspoke, I apologize. As a lawyer, I misspeak lots of times.
That's sports anyway.
That's sports anyway, right? So you can get nominal damages. And then the thing that lawyers love, and clients love it too, punitive damages. If the defamation is truly egregious, if it has truly caused harm, if it's not what they call the garden variety emotional anguish, if it caused you to go into counseling, if it caused you to get, anti-anxiety medication, if it caused you to relapse into something and PTSD, then the jury may decide to punish the person who defamed you. And how much depends a lot upon the worth of who defamed you. If it's Bill Smith, your neighbor, who is a tradesman, it's probably not going to be a very high punitive damages award. If it is a major publisher, it's probably going to be pretty high. Remember, we talked way back when about McDonald's and the punitive damage award. The idea of punitive damages is to award just enough that it hurts. Not to kill you,
Right. Not to put you
but
under.
just enough to hurt so that you don't do it again. And what is just enough to hurt depends upon
What you got.
who the defendant is. So, for example, going back to the McDonald's case, the punitive damages, which seem so high and everybody goes up in arms, and we talked about what everybody doesn't really understand about that case way back when. I think it's 6 months ago now. My goodness, I've been doing this for a while. But what the punitive damage award was in the McDonald's case was 1 day's worth of coffee sales in the United States. That's how the jury calculated it.
Sure, and if you think of it that way, how could that hurt?
Yeah, it doesn't really hurt in the scheme of things. It hurts when you look at the overall number. But
When you find out what that number is.
right, it was
you're
the
like,
jury
"Whoa."
just saying, well, here's a day of sales, don't do it again. They could have done a lot. They could have done a week's worth of sales.
Right.
And even then, the punitive damages award was already reduced. And we went through that,
Right.
6 months ago. All right, so now let's turn into, I think it's a little bit of fun. Defamation over the last 10 years, even more so the last 5 years, has expanded and mushroomed into internet types of defamation. Before 10 years ago, you couldn't find a reported case on internet defamation. Now there is an entire body of law on being defamed utilizing social media sites, the internet, stock message boards, where you're talking about stock prices, and every other thing you could think. And the law is no different than the ordinary law of defamation. I mean, it took the courts a while to try to wrestle with that. defamation is defamation. Defamation per se is defamation per se. What really had to be wrestled with was who is entitled to the media defense, where it has to be proved beyond clear and convincing evidence, and you can't win unless you can show that the defamation was knowingly false or reckless disregard of the truth. It can't be negligent. So every Tom, Dick, Harry, and Jane who had at that time a blog, now they're vlogs, claimed media status. They're, they have a reach. And a lot of courts issued conflicting opinions, which is normal.
Wasn't that just ego?
Well, no, I mean, they're taking law and they're saying, okay, look, I'm publishing.
I'm a person with a blog.
I'm publishing,
I'm media.
And the courts had to wrestle with it, and ultimately, the general consensus is, and it's still, it's a case-by-case basis, but, if you are...
Now, let me ask you this. Wouldn't it be looked upon as opinion?
Okay, opinion is not defamation.
Okay.
Defamation, remember...
But if you truly are not the media, you're just a person with a story to tell, and you're telling it on the internet...
You're protected unless it's a false statement of fact.
Are you media, or are you a person with opinion?
No, the person of opinion media, they're apples and oranges. They're irrelevant. They're contradictory theories. Opinion is always protected, no matter who you are. First Amendment protects opinion. Mm-hmm. False statement of fact is defamation. The question of who can assert a media privilege so that you have to prove defamation by clear and convincing evidence instead of by a preponderance of the evidence, that's a different issue.
See, the difference between media is an entity that is providing news, and the end result is we make money.
Well, that's what a lot have argued.
But if I have a blog and I just have how am I making money?
Well, some people do make money on the internet with their blogs.
Oh, see, I don't know how. I don't get it. It's too deep.
I guarantee my
14-year-old
understands it. I'm
how to make money with a blog. Wow,
sure.
I got to talk to your kid.
Yeah, I'm sure. He better not be doing it, but I'm sure he understands it.
Okay.
So the courts wrestled with the doctrine and tried to apply it to existing law. And essentially where they have come down for the most part is, you're a blogger. No, you're not going to get the media defense. You're a vlogger, video. You're likely not going to get the media defense either. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have a regular podcast, if you have a certain reach, and there's no magic number, if you solicit advertising, and the more so you do these things, the more likely it is the court may give you media status.
Because now you look like a business.
More like a business, yes. And there are some that truly are. So, internet defamation has the same rules, but it's a little harder to apply in terms of who gets the media defense.
Okay.
So, let's go into a good old internet case. One of my old ones, and I don't know, it might be my favorite, just because of the audacity of the statements. I had a client, goodness knows how many years ago. Client lived in a foreign country. He was an expatriate, moved, out of the U.S. and moved somewhere else. But while he was here, he had engaged in a battle with one particular person. I mean, a lot of people got involved, but one particular antagonist on several stock message boards, which really are supposed to be to talk about stocks. And as I read through all these messages way back when, this one particular person did not like my client's opinions about a stock, various stocks, I don't remember. Beep, beep, beep.
It's I think it's your iPad.
Oh, goodness. Oh, it's somebody trying to call in on my phone. Get that off. My goodness. Whoa.
See, even you can still hear vibrate. Isn't that amazing?
It is. I need to shut it off, but then it doesn't get the hotspot connection. All right, so he had some issues with my client's opinions on stocks. And I think he may have actually known my client in person. I'm not sure, because some of these statements seem to imply that he did. But we had a lawsuit. We filed a lawsuit for defamation here in good old Martin County.
Mm-hmm.
And, first we had to deal with the issue of everything was done over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Martin County have jurisdiction. And we got past that hurdle.
Right.
So let's talk at some of the statements.
And then would you have just an IP address of that person? Do you
Yes.
need, I mean, that's it.
You can see where it came from.
Wow. Yeah.
Where was it going?
Yeah.
If it touches our state, is that good enough? I mean, all sorts of laws
Yeah.
of jurisdiction and venue, which are beyond this week's topic.
Okay.
Yes, hello, Cheryl, my paralegal. You know something? You're supposed to be listening, not watching. Do your work. All right, so let's go through some of these statements and let's have a little bit of fun, maybe. And I'm going to use a first name because nobody will ever figure out who it is because it was 10 years ago. I won't use last names. Barry is an overt racist. Is that a statement of fact or an opinion?
I would say opinion.
I would think you're probably right.
But the weird thing is, you said this was on a stock site.
Yes.
And how does that even correlate? I'm not.
He was just he was
I
angry at the.
don't like you, and so.
So I'm going to now
Okay.
start accusing you of all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
Oh, it
okay.
gets better. It gets better. Okay. Barry, have you ever fondled a black child? Fact or opinion?
Well, that's a question.
Yeah, it is, but is it fact or opinion?
I wouldn't know.
Okay. It implies knowledge of something.
Okay.
The court is more likely to view that as a statement of fact because it looks at what would the reader interpret, and there is an implication there that this person has information. Next one. He wrote this as if he were my client. He was spoofing the identity of my client. Somehow he got username, password, whatever. And so on another stock message board, he is writing a statement as if he is my client.
Okay.
So this is the statement. I love to molest little boys almost as much as I enjoyed murdering my first wife for the insurance money. Is that defamation?
I don't know.
It's an accusation of a crime.
Yeah, but it's like but it's like the other person. Now, did you have to figure out what IP address that came
Well,
from?
we figured it out. It's clear
first
that-
of all, who would write that about themselves?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So again, now you take into context all the stuff that's going on this message board, and who would write that about himself?
Yeah.
So it was pretty clear it wasn't. Then this other guy had probably usurped his identity. There's an accusation of a crime there. There's an accusation of immorality. It's not only defamation; it's defamation per se.
Plus, they worded it like a confession.
Yeah. I mean, what could be worse than I love to molest little boys, and
Yeah.
then you add to it
Yeah.
as much as I enjoy murdering my first wife for the insurance money.
Wow.
We're not done yet. Barry fondles little boys. Fact or opinion?
No, that's stated like a fact.
You dang right. It ain't libel if it's true, right, Barry, you murdering Jew?
Wow.
I'm putting you on the spot here.
This is a crazy person.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So is that going to be a statement of fact or opinion? He's implying it's true, isn't he? It ain't liable if it's true. In other words, go ahead and sue me. I have the defense of truth.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? Then, but that part, is not, bad. Right, Barry? Well, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
You murdering Jew. Is that going to be a fact or an opinion?
It sounds like a fact.
Yes, it does, but
It's that crazy person's opinion.
It's stated as a fact, but now let's look at how would a reasonable person interpret it. You murdering Jew. It's an epithet. I think most people would understand that as just a curse, a derogatory ad hominem comment, rather than a statement of fact that, you're Jewish and you kill. And I think you could probably substitute a lot of, religions and faiths into that, depending upon stereotypes. So I actually don't even think that's defamatory.
Okay.
And I represented him. Barry drowned his first wife in a bathtub. She found him molesting an underage boy, so he murdered her slowly. Oh, I had fun with this case. Is that fact or opinion?
It sounds like fact.
Yes. He murdered his first wife in a bathtub. That's fact. She found him molesting an underage boy. That's fact. So he murdered her slowly. That's fact.
Yeah.
Defamation per se. This tells you approximately when it happened. Will Bush pardon Barry for the murder of his wife? Not likely. While homosexuality has become less of a taboo, sex with young boys still is. Fact or opinion? Defamatory or not defamatory?
It sounds like fact to me.
Which part?
You'd have to read it again.
Will Bush pardon Barry for the murder of his wife?
Okay,
Not
that sounds like fact.
Okay, there is a question there, but the murder of his wife is a
But the
clear
question is
implication.
about Bush,
Right.
not about the wife.
No, it's
Over
about
the
Barry.
about the murder.
Well, it's Barry for the murder of his wife. There's a clear implication of a
yeah.
statement of fact that he murdered his wife.
Right.
Not likely. While homosexuality has become less of a taboo, sex with young boys still is.
Okay, but that could be just a statement in general, not necessarily about Barry.
Well, the first clause, I agree with you. While homosexuality has become less of a taboo, it's not a statement of anything or an opinion. Well, I guess it's an opinion. Sex with young boys still is. There's a clear implication, isn't there? That Bush is not going to pardon Farfanugan. That Bush is not going to pardon Barry because he engages in sex with young boys, which is still a taboo. I'd say that's a statement of fact. That's defamation per se. Just a few more.
Now, this correspondence, just curious, is this correspondence between these two people, or is
This is open. And there are
okay.
hundreds of comments on both sides of favoring Barry and against Barry. And so now the question becomes, all the ones that joined this schmagegi, I'll call them, and started piling on, are they guilty of defamation too? Depending upon what they say, yes.
Well, they were steered in a false direction.
Doesn't matter. If they pile on with their opinion, they're protected. If they pile on with the same accusations of fact, I could have sued the whole bunch of them, no matter
that
where
would
they
have
were.
been my next question. Did you?
No. No, he just wanted to go after this guy. They both had a bone to pick with each other. So the next one. Bin Laden thinks he will have 17 virgins in heaven. Does Barry think he will have 17 little boys?
Again, it's the question that makes me not know if it's.
I know,
yeah.
but forget whether it's like they teach in language arts. Forget whether it's stated as a question, an interrogatory. Well, an interrogatory is a question, or I don't even know. I just made myself look stupid because and I'm trying to remember now the 4 forms of statements, but I'll leave that for my son too. It doesn't matter. It's what would be reasonably understood by the average person. And to me, if you looked at that alone, if that was the only comment you were looking at, I'd say no. But if you look at it in the context of these other comments,
things, sure.
then I'd say it's defamatory.
How long did this go on?
Months. These aren't all the comments.
Okay.
I mean, I think we have 3 more I have here. Barry, I'm sorry if the disgusting details of your child molestations have been disclosed. What happens in name of a foreign country should stay in name of a foreign country and not be made public on Yahoo boards. Well, Judge?
I think that. Yeah, that one I don't know either. I don't
If
know.
the disgusting details of your child
Okay,
molestations, state the fact.
Fact. Mm-hmm.
And then this isn't a quote here, I'm just being descriptive. The defendant and others claimed that they intended to kill, murder, and or maim Barry. Among the ways discussed in the posts by the defendant and others is to shoot him or drop him in a vat of acid. So these are things that they're saying on the board.
Right.
How they're going to kill him.
The accusers.
Yeah,
The alleged accusers.
the accusers. They went to court, the accusers. The accuser. Anything there?
Yeah, that's definitely defamation. I mean,
Well, I'm going to kill you. Is that defamation?
no.
Maybe something else.
But this person is saying that that's what someone else said.
Well, the defendant and others made similar comments because they all piled on in the comment section. So I'm going to kill you. I'm going to murder you. I'm going to maim you.
Mm-hmm.
I might want to go get an injunction against violence to protect myself, a restraining order, but not really defamation. But then you add in, okay, but still, drop him in a vat of acid. Why would I have that in a complaint if that is not defamation? Well, I'm trying to, first of all, in the beginning, let the court know on the inevitable motion to dismiss that comes when you file a complaint these days. Judge, this is bad.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just, take it slow. And if we ever were to have got to trial, this would have been the wrapping, the icing, that would explain to the jury the anger which this guy felt towards my client. Why? To try to get punitive damages. You've got the statements, but this is the vehemence, the hatred, how despicable he felt. And
So you said if it went to trial, did it settle
of
before?
course. And the last one, in various posts, Mr. Defendant initiated a discussion of a death pool for when and how the plaintiff would die, when and how Barry would die. So, pick your box and, it's like the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, is that incitement to violence? Maybe kill him so that you can win the pool? I don't know. It's not defamation.
It makes it sport, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I don't think it's defamation.
That's scary.
But, could it be assault?
And his defense would be, I was angry?
No, actually.
I mean, how do you defend yourself against all of that
here
in
was-
writing?
Here was his defense. By the way, I will say one thing. I will not give a name. But he had an honorific title based upon a prior life experience. And the honorific title was general. I'll leave it there for you all to ponder. So, these are, it can get pretty bad. And yes, this case settled relatively early on. Not for a ton of money. For some money, for this guy taking down all the posts that he posted, and for him seeking to have, mostly it was Yahoo message boards, delete the other posts that came as a result of his original post, because he had no control over those. He says, if I'm taking down the master post, I'd like you to eliminate everything else without having to go to everybody for permission. And that he was going to use his best efforts to do that. There was a letter of apology, which my client was able to then make public and, boast about, and prance about, I won.
But it is defamation and damage is already done.
Right. But the truth is my client did live in another country now as what they call an expat. And so this stuff wasn't really going to follow him there. He had a great reputation there for helping the villages. And I looked at the foreign country, I looked at their newspapers and the main city he lived in. His name was in the newspapers quite frequently. And it was all for good stuff. So I think that he made another life for himself. This hadn't followed him. So were there economic damages? I don't know. Emotional anguish, I'm sure, but he'd made another life for himself. He wasn't looking to go to trial. He didn't want to come back to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't looking for a trial. He was looking for a little pound of flesh.
Now, let me ask you this, because it was on the internet, and that is a voluntary. You have to actually log on to this.
Mm-hmm.
Had he just stopped after the first, the very first post that was nasty?
Barry is an overt racist. Have you ever fondled a black child? If he stopped there?
Yeah.
If he stopped there, I don't think it would have been a great case. It probably would have been a marginal case.
I mean, if both parties had just gotten off the internet.
That you probably would not have gotten into a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how much time do I have since my little clock is on?
You've got 2 minutes.
I got the 2-minute warning. Well, in football,
minutes.
is that like 10 minutes?
No, it's 2 minutes.
It's 2 real minutes?
Yeah, it's really 2 minutes.
Oh, my goodness gracious. All right. Well, I'm going to tell you something that we'll talk about very briefly next week. Defamation can be criminal. When? How? Consequences? We can talk about that next week. And we'll talk about a little bit about the statute of limitations. How long do you
Okay.
have to file a defamation claim? Other than that, I know we have the rabbi stage right, getting ready for Ask a Rabbi. Whoa! There goes my little feed. I'm sorry. And I yelled in everybody's ear who's actually listening to the radio. So, I hope you found this interesting. I hope you were so mesmerized that you were listening instead of calling in with your calls, which you can always, always, always do. So if you still do have questions, call my office. Cheryl, who is watching on Facebook Live, will be happy to talk to you. The number at the office is 772-781-8003. Or you can go to our website and fill out the contact information form, which is stewartaddresslaw.com. And until next week, thanks for listening, and this is Ask a Lawyer.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.